All right, so in this lecture, we're going to talk about the professional skills for the AAA. We know that this has been recently introduced within the advanced audit and assurance exam paper. And obviously, these are significant marks, 20% of the exam that you need to gain. So first of all, you need to understand what are these professional marks and what are these for, and how they are split in the different parts of the audit paper. So we'll be discussing this in this lecture. Let's see, first of all, what are these professional skills? Now, remember one thing, that these professional skills, these 20 marks, which we are going to talk about in this lecture, are not separate marks in the exam. Like this is not a topic that you need to learn, or this is not a practice what you can do. These 20 marks are integrated with the other 80 marks of the exam. For example, question number one. Question number one is a 50 marks joint question. We'll be discussing that in a while. In that we need to, identify the business risk, the audit risk. So these professional skills are integrated with that 40 mark question. It's not something separate within the exam that you need to answer. So this is the first thing that you need to keep in your mind, that these professional marks or professional skills, even initially we used to have these professional marks, but those were very less. Now we have 20 marks, so that means 20% of the exam. So these professional marks or skills are not separate, and basically integrated or linked with the questions in the exam paper. So this is not a topic that you can do and you can get the 20 marks. So these are basically the professional skills that you need to apply while drafting your answers, so that you can gain these professional marks. So these are professional skills that you need to apply while drafting your answers. So if any one of you has attempted the SBL, now they know clearly that even in the SBL, these are not separate marks. These are linked with the case study. So, okay, what are these professional skills? So we have the communication. We'll be discussing that in a while. We have analysis and evaluation. So the communication means that when you are dealing with this advanced audit and assurance exam, you are assumed to be a person working in an audit firm as an audit manager or the audit partner. For example, you are an audit manager, you're communicating to the partners. So obviously you are working at the strategic level. The communication this paper requires is something strategic, something professional. You're not communicating with the accounting technicians, you're not communicating with the audit juniors. So basically your communication is with the board, with the finance directors, and with the audit partners, with the engagement partners, with the key audit partners. So your communication is with them. So when your communication is with them, obviously you need to keep this thing in your mind, that you're using the proper formats, you're giving them the appropriate information, you're keeping their seniority in your mind as well. For example, when you're communicating with an audit partner, obviously you do not need to define them what is audit, what is assurance. So previously in an exam question, student used to do this in order to expand their answers, that they start defining defining the terms over there. But here the communication is all about, like, you need to know that you're communicating with the strategic level people, the board, the directors, the partners, the key audit partners, the engagement partners. So you need to keep this thing in your mind, that you're going to be straightforward, you're going to respect their seniority, You're not going to define the things for them. Obviously, you need to tell them what they're exactly looking for. We'll be discussing this in a while in more detail, but communication is all about that. Then we have the analysis and evaluation. Obviously, when it comes to analysis, uh, that means we need to see within an exam question whether they are whether there's something that has been omitted, for example, not mentioned over there, whether there is some information which is not sufficient and you cannot rely on that information, whether you need to calculate something, for example, the ratio analysis like we used to do in analytical procedures, that makes part of the analysis as well. Similarly, we have the ethical issues and things like that. So we have the analysis. So the analysis mean that obviously you're going to evaluate the situation, you're going to analyze the situation, and based on the facts and figures you will be having within an exam question, you will be reaching to the appropriate conclusion. So analysis and evaluation is all about that. uh, where we are going to use this, we'll be discussing that in a while. So then we have the professional skepticism and judgment. Again, we know this thing that skepticism is all about having the questioning mind, having the investigative approach, and being alert to the conditions. So when you are dealing with an exam question, you need to be skeptical. For example, in within the question number one, we have the audit risk, we have the business risk or risk of material misstatement. We have over there the financial statement risk. For example, they're having something regarding the revenue. So you're saying okay, there is a significant risk regarding the revenue. Revenue may be overstated or things like that. So the professional skepticism is all about, having the questioning mind, being alert to the condition. And for example, if there are any estimates that the directors took within the exam question, for example, something regarding the provisions, that they're revising the provision, they're revising the allowances. So whether their changes in within the accounting estimates are reasonable. So you need to apply your professional skepticism and judgment. Like obviously, you are an auditor, you are doing the audits of overall industry. You see many companies, you see many financial statements, you know the market, you know the changes in the market, how the market is changing, what exactly is happening in the market. So what the directors have done, you need to see in your judgment whether according to the IES, IFRS, or any other quality control standards, is that the right thing what they're doing, or for example, there is something that is going towards the misstatement. So professional skepticism and judgment is all about that. And then we have the commercial acumen. Now, this is all about the practicality of the situation. We have certain areas within an exam question where you need to see the practicality of the situation, the commercial decisions. Now, when we say commercial, that means you need to look at the things professionally, practically, something which is favorable for your firm. For example, if when you're accepting a new audit client, whether you should accept that audit client, or for example, when you accept that client, maybe your reputation is being damaged, or you, for example, you will not be getting the fee from them. You may get involved into some litigations and that can affect the reputation of the company. Or for example, you're evaluating the business risk in the question number one, that can affect the. Now the business risk is something very different to the financial statement risk, and if you're taking my lectures, you know it, that within the question number one, there's a clear discrimination between the business risk and audit risk. In the business risk, you need to think like a businessman. Some anything which can affect the objective of the business, the strategic risk known as the business risk. For example, they're losing the market share. Let's assume they're having a significant litigations. So the commercial acumen is all about the commercial decisions and the practicality of the situation, the professional issues you can say as well. So these are the professional skills: communication, analysis and evaluation, professional skepticism, and commercial acumen. And remember again, these are the professional skills that you need to apply while drafting your answers. And these are not the separate marks, and this is not a separate topic that you can prepare and can get these 20 marks. So this is actually linked with the exam question. Now, coming towards the exam, this will help you to understand how we are going to apply these professional skills over there. So in the section A, we know that section A will comprise a case study, a giant case study basically, worth 50 marks, and set at the planning stage of the audit line for a single company. It can be a single company or a group of companies. We have the when we have the group audits or potentially several audit clients. So the section A will test the planning and the risk assessment, the audit risk, the business risk, alongside the evidence gathering. For example, the substantive procedures. We know when we see the question number one within the exam kit and the past papers, we see a lot of audit procedures coming. For example, procedures for the government grants, procedure for the borrowing cost. So here it is again not F8 exam that you are dealing with. This is the advanced audit and assurance exam. So whenever you will be getting the question from the evidence, even in the question number one or in the other question, make sure you're dealing with the standards rather than the topic. It's not a fair where you will be making the procedures relevant to the receivables and payables, and for example, the purchases. Here you will be having the evidence pertaining to the revenue recognition, the share-based payments, the employee benefits, IS 19, IS 12, the deferred tax. So without having the knowledge of the accounting standard, that is why you have seen that in my course, I have too much emphasized on the knowledge of the IS and IFRS. There are videos where I've explained each and every standard alongside their risk and then the audit procedures, because the P7 exam requires accounting knowledge. Students who have appeared in this exam many times, if you know anyone, you can contact them and take a review from them, take a feedback. They will always tell you that they are weak in the standard, that is why they're struggling to pass this exam. So without having the appropriate knowledge of the standards, you will not be able to pass this exam, because the planning area, other than the business risk, because in the business risk you need to have the business knowledge of the case study. In the audit risk, again, you need to know the standard. For example, uh, they have written this thing, and that they have issued the share options to their directors, and the options are contingent upon taking the share price up to a certain level. Now I need to know which standard it is. Like it is IFRS 2, and whether this is equity settled share based payment or cash settled share based payment. And when they have kept a condition which is a market condition, do we need to account for the market condition while creating an expense within the statement of profit or loss? So if you're not aware of the standard, then how you can write the risk? But if you are aware of it, for example, that the directors are saying that they because the conditions are not likely to be met, they are not going to record an expense within the statement of profit or loss. So you obviously will be saying that according to the standard, the expense should be recorded irrespective of the conditions being met. Now this is possible when you have the knowledge of the standards. Other than that, you will not be able to do that. So the planning, which includes the audit risk. When we say audit risk, that means inherent control and deduction. Although we are not supposed to relate that with an exam question whether this is inherent control and deduction. This is another blunder that many students make by relating it with that. It's not that. Just a minute. We are not supposed to relate this thing with the audit inherent risk, control risk, and the deduction risk. This has nothing to do with that. So audit risk, or the financial statement risk, and then we have the risk of material misstatement, and then sometimes we have both audit risk and business risk. And these are, believe me, these are the free marks. And if you're watching my lectures and the relevant practice, these are the free marks that you can get from your question number one. So it's a 50-mark question. And if you do this question very well, believe me, you're able to get 35 to 40 out of it. And then you can easily make the P7 exam. But if you are weak in the question number one, you will never be able to pass this exam. So make sure that you are practicing the question number one in a way that you are at least extracting 35 to 40 marks out of it. Then you will be easily able to pass this exam in the first attempt. Okay, and then we have the professional considerations. We have the ethical and professional issues within the question number one as well. So this is the section A. Now coming towards the professional marks. So out of 50, we have 40 technical marks. Technical marks means relevant to the audit risk. For example, 18 marks for the audit risk. Let's assume 10 marks for the business risk. And then, for example, we have 5 procedures, 5 marks for the substantive procedures. If, for example, there's an ethics part for 10 marks. So 40 marks are allocated to the technical marks. That means relevant to the requirements. And then we have the 10 professional skills. Now it says 10 professional skills. All professional skills will be examined in the section A. All professional means, again, moving toward these professional skills. For example, communication. Now, relevant to the question number one, let's discuss thing in detail. Relevant to the question number one, what this communication is about. Communication is about, for example, you have the briefing notes. Prepare the briefing notes. Let's assume this is mostly the requirement within the question number one. Now, for the briefing notes, you need to know the proper format of it. Starting, let's assume, from the introduction. Within the introduction, you are going to explain that what you are going to explain in all those requirements and all this complete briefing notes. What are you explaining? So this is basically an introduction of what you are going to explain in this briefing note. So introductory lines, that means introduction. And then we have the headings. For example, you are writing the business risk. Let's assume market shares and decreased market share. Let's assume competition, so making a heading of rivalry, increased rivalry. So we have the headings, and sometimes we have the subheadings as well. For example, within one risk, you can make 2 subheadings. So headings, and then we have the subheadings. So this is all about, the presentation. And then we need to see whom we are addressing, whom you are addressing. So you need to see whom you're addressing. Obviously, you need to respect their seniority. You need to give them the appropriate information. Don't just try to explain the terms to them, because obviously they're engagement partner. They're more senior than you. Don't try to explain them the terms. So this is all about the communication. So it's all about the flow you will be having within an exam question. It's all about the language, the terms you are using. Make sure those are audit terminologies. You're not using the slangs. You're using the professional terminologies, professional language, the audit language. For example, the material misstatement, the financial statement risk. So the language, audit language. And then you need to be factual. That means obviously talk about the facts within the case study. Don't just sugarcoat anything. There's no need to sugarcoat anything. So this is all about the communication within the question number one. So it says all professional skills will be examined in the section A. So that means communication, and then we have the analysis. Now let's come to this. For example, within the question number one, you have the financial statement extracts. Now this is mostly in the case of the group audit question. Like, for example, when you're disposing some shares in a company, and you still have the control, then no gain or loss should be recorded, and only movement in equity should be reported. And within the financial statement extract, for example, they have given the consolidated financial statement. And within the consolidated financial statement, they have given you the gain on disposal. Now you need to be skeptical to identify that there is a gain on disposal within the financial statement, which should not be the case. And how this gain, which is being recorded by the director, is affecting their financials, how it is affecting their revenue, how it is affecting their profit, how they have done the creative accounting based on this treatment. So this is all about analysis, and then calculating the ratios. For example, when you have the financial statement extracts, so we need to calculate the current ratio. We need to calculate the quick ratio. asset test ratio. We need to do the trend analysis. For example, you're comparing this year revenue with the previous year revenue, the trend analysis. And then we have the professional skepticism. For example, within the question number 1, again, they have given you the financial statement extracts. And you see, for example, there's a non-current liability for 2 years. Let's assume this is 5,000 and this is 7,000. So loans are increasing. So then you went to the finance cost. So the finance cost was static. For example, it was 400 for both years. Then obviously this is a risk that the loans are increasing, but they have not shown any increase within the finance cost. So this is all about professional skepticism and judgment. And then again, professional acumen, again, the practicality of the situation. Within the question number 1, it's all about the business risks. So for example, you have the business risk in the question number 1. Now, when you're identifying the business risk, it's not about just identifying them. For example, there's a drop in the market share. Now, this is a business risk. You need to explain that how this is a business risk. They're losing the market share. That means they will be having, for example, the production, but they will not be able to sell the things. And if they're losing the market share, there will be the significant drop in the revenue, but expenses will be still there, and the company will come into the losses. And eventually, if it continues for a longer time, this can affect their going concern. So it's not just about, identifying the business risk. It's explaining within the exam question then how it is affecting the client business. So then moving towards the section B, in the section B, we have 2 compulsory 25-mark questions, because the section A is having 1 question of 50 marks. Now, obviously, there are 2 questions in the section B. Now, within each question, there are 20 technical marks and 5 professional skills marks. So here we were having 50, 40 for technical, 10 for professional, and all the professional skills, all those 4, as I've given you the example in the question number 1, are examinable. So that means you'll get some marks for professional acumen, some for professional skepticism, and this will make 10 marks based on the scenario, obviously. And then we have the section B, 20 technical mark and 5 professional skills marks, but all professional skills are not examinable. Examine a combination of professional skills appropriate to the question. Each question will examine a minimum of 2 professional skills. Now, let's assume there's 1 question from the section E, because there are 2 questions. 1 question will always be from section E, which is completion, review, and reporting. Now, let's assume there's 1 question which is from the report. Now, within the report, what we need to do, we need to evaluate the situation, whether they have done the correct accounting. Okay. And then we need the professional judgment. That whether, for example, within the report, we know whether if there's a material misstatement, whether this is material or material and pervasive. Now that means when it comes to the report question, 2 skills are compulsory, which is analysis and evaluation. And then we have this one. We have the judgment, professional skepticism and judgment, because this report question requires you to analyze the situation when they have not done the transaction, when they have not done the accounting of the transactions properly, and it is affecting the financial statement. So sometimes the examiner asks you to evaluate the financial reporting implication. For example, they have not recorded an expense, they have not recorded a provision. So you need to evaluate the situation. And then we have the judgments, as I've given you the example. For example, there's a material misstatement. You need to judge whether it is material or material and pervasive, because there's a different opinion for material and pervasive. If there's a material misstatement and in fact is material, we need to give the qualified opinion. And if it is material and pervasive, we need to give the adverse opinion. So that means the report will test these 2 skills over there. And for example, the other question, let's assume, is coming from the ethics. Now, ethics will have the separate professional skills. So that means there's no need to be worried about these 20 marks. All you need to do is to prepare the topic well. Just make sure you are making the appropriate headings, you're using the appropriate terminologies, you're using the appropriate presentation, you have the knowledge, you can extract something out of the case study, you can give the references of the standards, you can comment on some matters which are supposed to be discussed. For example, if there is some evidence which has already been collected and the examiner asks you to, for example, comment on the evidence collected, so you need to know what the standard says about it, whether this is sufficient, whether this is appropriate. For example, there's a report question and there's a report which has already been made and the examiner asks you to critically evaluate the report. Then you need the evaluation skills. So these are not the separate marks. You need to apply these skills within an exam question, and you need to apply these skills while drafting your answers. So I'll share this slide with you guys. This is again something not written by me. This is directly from the ACC website. I've already written, but what I have explained to you is not over there. And you need to remember what I have explained with respect to the question number one, particularly because all the professional skills are over there, and just try to get the maximum marks out of it. Make sure you're getting at least 35 to 40 marks, then you will be easily able to make this exam. The rest you can read it, what communication is all about, what analysis and evaluation is all about, what is professional skepticism, and what is commercial acumen. I have related this thing for you guys to the exam question, and now the rest depends upon you how you are practicing the questions. And make sure you are practicing as much question as you can and share your answers with me so that I can review. Also, you have the computer-based exam, so just don't waste time in practicing paper-based. Just uh, practice on the laptop, even using a keyboard, an external keyboard, because usually you appear in the computer labs where you do not have the laptops, and at some places we have the remote exam, but not everywhere. In the remote exams, obviously you can use a laptop, but when you're appearing in the computer CB lab, the computer-based exam lab, there you have the external keyboards, and whenever, even I use the laptop whole day in my office and for my classes as well. For classes, I use the gadgets as well. Sometimes when I'm using the keyboard, I feel very difficult to type because obviously there's a huge gap in the keys of the keyboard, and while using the laptop is different. You can understand this thing. Many people who are using both, they can understand this what I'm saying. So because you need the typing speed with an exam to complete your exam, so make sure you are practicing much so that you are able to complete your exam. Because if you are going more than 90% in the exam, then there are 90% chances you are making for the exam. But for example, if you're attempting 75, 80, then there's a significant risk that you will fail. So this is all about professional skills within the AAA exam. All right, did you get it?